Oliver was exhausted. It was nearly 3 in the morning, and the London streets were completely washed out by a relentless, heavy rain. He was ready to log off his driving app and finally head home to North London. But just as he was about to press the button, his phone buzzed. One last fare. The pickup location was a dark, narrow lane right alongside Highgate Cemetery. The drop-off was a remote Victorian manor house deep in the Hertfordshire suburbs. It was a massive fare, too much money to turn down. When Oliver pulled up to the curb near the towering Gothic gates of the cemetery, a lone figure was already waiting under a broken, flickering street lamp. It was a young woman draped in a heavy, sodden trench coat. Her face was entirely obscured by wet, tangled hair clinging to her cheeks. She didn't wait for him to say hello. She simply opened the rear door and slipped into the back seat. Oliver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Rough night out there, mate," he said, trying to break the heavy silence. The girl didn't move. She didn't look at him. She just stared straight ahead into the back of his driver's seat. Oliver shrugged it off. London was full of eccentric characters at 3 a.m. He put the car into gear and drove away from the graveyard. 10 minutes into the journey, the city lights faded away into the background, replaced by pitch-black country roads bordered by twisted skeletal trees. Suddenly, the atmosphere inside the car shifted. The temperature plummeted instantly. It wasn't just a chill. It was a bone-deep, biting frost. Oliver could suddenly see his own breath misting heavily in the air. He cranked the car's heater up to maximum, but it blew out nothing but ice-cold air. Nervous, he glanced back at the rearview mirror to check on his passenger. She was still sitting perfectly still. But this time, Oliver noticed something that made his stomach drop. The air was so cold that his own breath was thick like smoke, but from the back seat, there was nothing. No mist. No movement. The girl's chest wasn't rising or falling. She wasn't breathing at all. Desperate to drown out the suffocating silence, Oliver reached out and turned on the radio. But there was no music. Only a harsh, piercing static, fading into a distorted, breaking, metallic voice that whispered, "Turn back. You are running out of road." Oliver slammed his hand on the dial, shutting it off. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He swallowed hard, keeping his eyes glued to the road ahead. Miss, we're about 5 minutes away from your destination." For the first time, the girl's head tilted slightly. Her lips parted and a voice that sounded like grinding stones echoed through the car. "He is watching us," she whispered. "From the boot." Oliver's foot nearly slammed the brake. The boot? The trunk of his car? A primal terror seized him. Was there someone locked inside his car? Was this a setup? A hijacking? Suddenly, a heavy, muffled thump-thump came from the rear of the vehicle. It sounded exactly like a fist banging against metal from the inside of the boot. Another loud, desperate thump followed. Oliver wanted to stop the car and run into the darkness, but the surrounding woods were pitch black and the rain was blinding. He was trapped in his own vehicle with a silent freak behind him and something or someone thrashing in the back. He accelerated, his speedometer climbing dangerously high on the slick, narrow lanes. He prayed for a petrol station, a CCTV camera, anything. And then his prayers were answered. Up ahead, blue and yellow flashing lights pierced the fog. A police checkpoint. A solitary officer in a high-visibility jacket stood next to a marked squad car, waving a glowing baton for Oliver to pull over. Oliver aggressively pulled the car to the side of the road. He rolled down his window, panting heavily, sweat mixing with the cold air. He didn't even wait for the officer to speak. "Officer, thank God. You need to help me," he stammered, his voice cracking with pure panic. "The girl in my back seat, she's not right. And there's someone locked in my boot. I heard them screaming and hitting the metal." The police officer stood there calmly. He turned his heavy torch on, shining the bright beam through the driver's window, illuminating the entire interior of the car. He scanned the front, then slowly panned the light across the back seat. The officer lowered the torch. His expression was deadpan, completely devoid of emotion. "Sir," the officer said, his voice eerily flat, "there is no one in your back seat. You are entirely alone." Oliver whipped his head around to look at the back seat. It was completely empty, but as his eyes adjusted, he saw it. The fabric of the seat was soaking wet in the exact shape of a human body, and a puddle of cold, muddy water was pooling on the floor mat. "No, no, she was just there!" Oliver screamed, clutching his head, I swear she was there. She spoke to me. The officer tapped the side of the door with his baton. Step out of the vehicle, sir. You look highly distressed. I'm going to need to inspect your boot. Oliver scrambled out of the car, trembling so violently he could barely stand. The cold rain drenched his shirt instantly. He walked to the rear of the car with the officer. The officer reached down, popped the latch, and lifted the heavy boot lid. Oliver covered his eyes, bracing himself to see a bloody corpse. Come have a look at this, sir, the officer muttered. Oliver opened his eyes. The boot was empty. There was no body. But resting on the floor of the trunk was a sodden, heavy trench coat, the exact one the girl had been wearing, and next to it, a yellow, decaying piece of an old British newspaper. The officer picked up the damp newspaper, shining his torch on the front page. Oliver leaned in to look. The headline was dated exactly 5 years ago to the day. It featured a photograph of the very same girl who had just been sitting in his back seat. The headline read, "Serial killer cab driver convicted. Missing girl's body found hidden in the boot." Oliver stumbled backward, gasping for air. No, that's impossible. I'm not a killer. I'm just an ordinary driver. I don't know anything about this. He looked to the police officer for protection, for reassurance, for sanity. But as he looked closer at the officer's high-vis jacket, his breath caught in his throat. The silver metallic name badge pinned to the officer's chest didn't say Metropolitan Police. It had Oliver's own full name engraved on it. Oliver raised his eyes to look at the police officer's face. The officer's face was identical to his own. It was a perfect clone of Oliver, but dead-eyed and grinning. Suddenly, the flashing blue lights vanished. The police car vanished. The dark country road dissolved into thin air. The sound of the pouring rain stopped completely. Oliver wasn't standing outside anymore. With a sudden, jarring jolt, Oliver found himself sitting right back in his driver's seat. He looked at the dashboard clock. It blinked. 2:45 a.m. The rhythmic slap of the windscreen wipers started up again. Oliver wasn't a victim, and he wasn't alive. 5 years ago, Oliver was the serial killer who murdered that girl and hid her in his boot, right before crashing his car on this very road and dying in the wreckage. He wasn't driving a regular fare. He was trapped in purgatory, cursed to relive the final 10 minutes of his wretched life for all eternity, haunted by the ghost of the passenger he took away. Oliver slowly looked up at the rearview mirror. His own reflection began to rot away, turning into a hollow skeletal corpse right before his eyes. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the dashboard. A new ride request appeared on the screen. Pickup location, Highgate Cemetery. Oliver looked directly into the mirror, his decayed lips curling into a sickening smile. "Your ride has arrived," he whispered. "Next time you book a late-night cab on a rainy night, make sure you check who is actually behind the wheel." But there is one final detail Oliver forgot. A detail that means his loop isn't just about his past, it's about the present. You see, Oliver's car didn't just disappear into thin air 5 years ago. The vehicle was sold off by the police after the investigation concluded, repainted, refurbished, and put right back onto the streets of London. Right now, as you listen to this, thousands of people are booking rides across the UK. Some are leaving crowded pubs, some are heading home from exhausting late-night shifts. And just a few minutes ago, a real living driver accepted a ride near a dark, quiet road. If you happen to be listening to this inside a cab right now, look at your driver. Does he look tired? Is he staring just a bit too intensely at the road ahead? Now, look down at your phone. Check your app. Is the car on the map actually moving, or has it been stuck on the exact same spot for the last 10 minutes? And most importantly, turn around. Check the boot, because Oliver might have finished his story, but his car is still out there, and you might just be his next fare.